set in the South, there'll be no overriding geographical majesty like in a Western with its endless skies and spectacular landscapes. Nope. In a Southern film, there will be one single defining feature. It's going to be hot. Stinking hot. Friggin' hot. In a Southern film, an actor will go through about 6 bottles of spray-on glycerin a day. There will be clingy dresses and sweaty upper lips and trickling perspiration moving downward toward the general vicinity of the loin. What's body heat but a remake of Double Indemnity with sweat? Intoxicating heat. Long, hot summer. In the heat of the night. The kind of heat that creates the sparks, that creates the heated conflict of Mississippi burning. The soporific heat of A Streetcar Named Desire, that kind of heat that gives Blanche DuBois the vapors, whatever that means. Heat! If, on the other hand, the film has the word heart in it, it's going to be syrupy. Crimes of the heart, places in the heart, hearts of Dixie. The heart is a lonely hunter. These films will be for and about women. The women will be fierce, independent, and headstrong. Quite often they will be Sally Field. If the film doesn't have the word heart in it, it may have the name of a plant. Steel magnolias, rambling rose, fried green tomatoes. These films will be about a lot of women. One of the women will be a former Miss Firecracker or Miss Honeysuckle or Miss Magnolia Blossom. One will wear kooky dresses. One will have just shot her husband. There will be a lot of protracted confessionals. Friendships will be strained, and then someone will remember something their wise grandmother once said, and they'll all realize how much their lives balance each other out. There'll be a male actor in this film. He will be nothing more than an appendage.
Steel Magnolias. Sally Field, Dolly Parton, Shirley MacLaine, Daryl Hannah, Olympia Dukakis, Julia Roberts, and Sam Shepard.
And Sam Shepard. How do you like them rosy red apples, Sam? Never mind that you were America's greatest living playwright. Never mind that most of these actresses would have ripped their own eyeballs out at some point in their career to be in your production. You are relegated to 8th banana in a film called Steel Magnolias. If you were a man forced to attend one of these treacly, diabetes-inducing pageantry of cod-accented, I do declare, peahen puffery, hook yourself up to an estrogen drip and pray that the theater catches on fire before the second reel. The Southern Women film is part of an ongoing retaliation for not casting any female parts in Deliverance. Somewhere between the singing happy slaves of Gone with the Wind and the lurking degenerates of Deliverance lies the true South. It's not all gallant men in magnolias, nor is it all rednecks and Bible thumpers. But the filmic interpretations of its people, racist, impoverished, unsophisticated, almost always seems to paint it that way. It's been almost 150 years since the South lost the Civil War. You'd think everybody'd be over it by now. But the South has developed a poetic response to the systematic humiliation heaped upon it, and it's known as the Lost Cause. The motto of the Lost Cause is, the South is going to rise again. And indeed, in 1939, with the help of MGM, it almost did.
There was a land of cavaliers and cotton fields, called the Old South. Here, in this pretty world, gallantry took its last bow. Here was the last ever to be seen of knights and their ladies fair, of master and slave. Look for it only in books, for it is no more than a dream remembered, a civilization gone with the wind.
When I was growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Mecklenburg School Board required that every student, black or white, view Gone with the Wind before they could enter the 4th grade. The idea was that Gone with the Wind was supposed to teach us something about the past, our history of the South. I was 8 years old when I saw it.
In the course of 4 hours, all I could gather was that Vivian Lee goes from carriage to miscarriage wearing a pair of curtains. Atlanta burns to the ground. Clark Gable utters the expletive damn. The Yankees are all a bunch of wall-eyed jerks. And Scarlett O'Hara is pretty much a total hoe.
Not long after that, my parents brought me to a drive-in movie theater, much like this one, to watch the Tennessee Williams story, Suddenly Last Summer. My parents thought it was going to be really sexy, so they wanted to be alone. They made me sit out in front of the car while the movie played. In the South, as it is hot enough to turn a human being into petroleum byproduct. My parents had driven 20 miles and made me sit in front of the grill of the car with steam spewing off the engine. I passed out from heat prostration. And that is the thing about the South. You can't always understand it, but sometimes you can feel it. And if a filmmaker has made you feel the South, he has achieved something remarkable. I am trying to make you feel the South right now. This seems to be shot on a hot summery night, but instead, it's fucking freezing. Had I managed to stay awake during Suddenly Last Summer, I would have realized that it has more to say about the South than anything Gone with the Wind has attempted.
Katharine Hepburn plays a decaying Southern matriarch who attempts to have her niece committed to a mental asylum and lobotomized to hide some ugly truths about the past.
Something horrible happened to that girl last summer. Some dreadful, traumatic experience of some kind.
She's babbling again, babbling and lying.
He left her home because
you stole him.
Lost her attractiveness.
The Tennessee Williams story is sometimes referred to as a memory play. In a memory play, a character experiences an occurrence in the present that dredges up an overwhelming trauma from the past.
He just grabbed me by the hand and dragged me into the water.
This causes time itself to perform a kind of loop, and the character cannot escape the present until it escapes its past. And that's the South in a nutshell. It cannot escape the stigma of losing the Civil War, and it seems as if Hollywood is never going to let it.
Nobody knows the trouble I've seen.
In a sense, the South itself is a memory play. The modern events that haunt it, based in racism, poverty, lack of sophistication, almost automatically conjures up its dark past. It seems as if we're always waiting for the South to get better, to catch up with the world, instead of accepting the South for what it is. The South has always celebrated the eccentric, the social outcast, but most of us are more skeptical. Hollywood decided a long time ago that the South treated people like dirt, and so Hollywood treats the South like dirt.
You go. Where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
There have always been two depictions of Southern men. There's the Gone with the Wind South, men in white linen suits taking the arms of demure young ladies with their lace parasols, or plantation owners standing in front of their white columns, or courtly black butlers named Roscoe, men who make their own whiskey. And then there's the Tobacco Road South, shotgun shack hillbillies and jackleg radio preachers, dumbass sheriffs, hog-collar country singers, and men who make their own whiskey. Southern heritage is an amazing thing, actually. What other culture or religion or human institution allows its inherent stupidity to be mined for comic value? But in the South, all you have to do is mention some twangy-throated hick drivel merchant like Jeff Foxworthy or Larry the Cable Guy, and you have invoked a regional hero. Where does this come from? What kind of people actually celebrate inbreeding, retardation, and reverse evolution? And why? The Southern sense of humor can probably be traced back to a Northerner, Samuel Langhorne Clemens, who left Connecticut in 1853 to take a job as a steamboat operator down the Mississippi River. He adopted the name Mark Twain, a nautical reference, and perhaps the first literary in-joke. Amongst his essays is instructions on how to tell an anecdote, quite possibly the world's first primer on stand-up comedy. When Mark Twain wrote The Adventures of Huck Finn, he voiced it in the vernacular of the protagonist hero, a 12-year-old illiterate kid. Huck Finn gets by on canny social skills, not book knowledge, and that is the essence of Southern humor. Intuition over intellect, survival skills over book learning. A joke is funny to a Southerner because it flatters the Southerner and rewards him for his lack of pretension.
Folks from the South ponder things that other people don't care about. If a number 2 pencil is the most popular pencil in the world, why isn't it number 1?
It seems that Southern folk have embraced this redneck hillbilly image of themselves, but where did it originate from?
I am a poor.
In the early 1900s, massive industrialization was drawing Southerners north in search of better work and bigger wages. And in 1915, the boll weevil, a tiny bug, practically wiped out the Southern cotton crop. The South languished. A new kind of class distinction was emerging, urban versus country. Some people embraced this, but others were surely homesick for the past.
The hillbilly was invented by northern newspapermen and other fantasists as a kind of antidote to civilization. He was an ambiguous figure, ripe for characterization. Hillbilly has always been an acceptable slur. The name itself, hillbilly. Okay, so you're somewhat de-evolved. You have a tendency to hold a grudge. You like to settle local disputes with a bit of violence, and you can make your own whiskey. So actually, the word you're looking for is Scotsman.
I feel in a stone
The term Billy very likely refers to followers of King William III. Appalachia was settled primarily by border and lowland Scots. The other view of the hillbilly was as a kind of heroic, self-sufficient, hard-working, dirt-poor, modern-day Davy Crockett. And the real hillbilly kind of falls between these two descriptions.
The word hillbilly first appears in print in 1900. The image, I think, goes back before that. But it gets solidified as the sort of hillbilly that I think most people think of, with long beard, big hat, barefoot, smoking a pipe, drinking moonshine, all of that. I think that all really starts in those early years of the Depression.
Corn was one of the primary crops of mountain people. It was traditional for farmers to convert part of that crop to whiskey, either to drink or to barter with. In fact, they considered it their right. And various attempts by federal revenue agents to regulate or tax or seize the whiskey often ended in shootouts. Furthermore, the people of Appalachia tended to settle their personal disputes without outside interference. The most famous of these was the Hatfield-McCoy feud in Mingo, West Virginia in the 1880s.
The way the feuding is imagined is that it's sort of born in the blood, and it's almost genetic, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Part of the idea of the feud is that no one remembers or knows why they're feuding. They're just feuding because they do.
The stereotype of the fightin', feudin' hillbilly embarrassed the northern elite, obsessed as they were with the new century and projecting a progressive image. In fact, in 1912, a major newspaper, the Baltimore Sun, suggested an amicable way of dealing with hillbillies. There are but two remedies, and they are education and extermination.
Extermination. Just wipe the dumbass southern yahoos off the face of the earth. Boy, who's holding a grudge, huh? Fortunately, this conflation was tempered by a bit of good old American levity. By the end of the 20s, the double-barreled impact of Prohibition and Depression had turned the hillbilly into a kind of source of inspiration. After all, here was a guy who could dwell in poverty with relentless good nature and make his own hooch. Ultimately, the hillbilly became a national inside joke, one based on the age-old idea that people with money get to make fun of those who don't have money. And its main progenitor was a syndicated comic strip.
Look what's happened to Little Abner. From the creative genius of cartoonist Al Cap, the fabulous characters of his world-famous comic strip.
Al Cap was a Connecticut cartoonist whose style was reminiscent of smutty Italian cartoons of the 20s. Little Abner, the main character, is an idealized male specimen. He's virile, he's handsome, he's dumber than a box of hammers. He's constantly being chased around the altar by Daisy May, a swamp hottie wearing a miniskirt 40 years ahead of its time. The remainder of the characters, and eventually there were over 2,000, were generally illiterate, physically malformed, and representative of various stages of advanced dementia.
You'll meet Earthquake Lagoon, Moonbeam McSwine, then Low and Evil Scrag, Evil Eye Fleagle, Available Joan, and get a load of gorgeous Julie Newmar as Stupefying Joan.
What does it do?
Little Abner made its debut on August 13th, 1934 in 8 newspapers, and by its peak, it appeared in 900 different papers and was read by 90 million people or more a day. That is more readership than Peanuts and Garfield combined, and all this from the imagination of a Connecticut cartoonist who'd only ever spent 2 weeks of his life below the Mason-Dixon line. A cartoon is the illiterate bastard stepchild of real literature, and so is the pulp fiction novel. And no one, absolutely no one, sold more pulp novels than Georgia writer Erskine Caldwell. He was the man who put the poor in pornography.
How can a broke man be happy? How can a broke man be content?
His novels had a visceral quality that was straightforwardly astonishing. The characters in an Erskine Caldwell story are physically and spiritually crippled by poverty. They're savages whose desperate actions are a consequence of trying to survive. They're too poor to be pitied. They're too desperate to even be exploited.
Are crying for bread and their little brown feet needing shoes.
Those stories were grounded in his childhood, I think. Growing up the son of an itinerant minister, he traveled into people's homes and tried to help them find food, find work, find education. He was interested in those people. He was moved by their plight, and he wanted to tell stories that would call attention to them, and he did repeatedly.
In Caldwell's first 2 novels, Tobacco Road and God's Little Acre, not only does he focus on the tenacious spirit of men and women, but also on sex and poverty. For example, in Tobacco Road, a sharecropper's daughter offers her body in exchange for a turnip.
It's hard to look at a novel like Tobacco Road and understand what's satire, what's realism, where's the balance there. They do extreme things, and he knows there's a humor in the extreme things they do, but at the same time there's a very serious purpose he has in trying to tell those stories.
God's Little Acre is about a dirt farmer who is so poor that he's actually hallucinogenic. He starts to believe that there's gold buried underneath his land, and he becomes so obsessed with digging it up that he doesn't even notice that his sons and daughters and various in-laws are only interested in having sex with each other.
The screen at last is big enough to hold God's Little Acre. With all its world-famous characters vibrantly, earthily, thrillingly alive. Live every warm, earthy moment. Share every lusty laugh.
How is it going, Jill? Is it going all over you?
Oh, that's nice. Oh, yes, that's very nice.
Nowadays, of course, you can see that stuff every day on Springer or in a place like Norfolk. But what Erskine Caldwell was trying to do was to portray the abuse of the Southern industrial worker and the disintegration of the family through the ravages of poverty.
Never give an heed to my son.
Well, ain't in a God big enough to kill each other.
I'm gonna tell you about God's little acre.
Neither Hollywood nor the publishing industry up north saw it quite like that. They smelled in Caldwell's stories a gold mine of raunch and bargain basement porn. Paperback versions of books began to be published in the mid-40s, and Erskine Caldwell quickly became the biggest-selling author in America, thanks in no small part to the lurid jacket covers. In fact, the book Tobacco Road was outsold by only Peyton Place and the Bible.
So there you have it. In the most progressive time in American history, the image of the Southerner falls somewhere between the bumbling yokel of Appalachia and the rural depravity of the Flatlander. This is not how the South chose to be portrayed. This is how Northern publishers and Hollywood filmmakers portrayed the South. And the image of the Southerner as an icon of ridicule is now firmly cemented in America's consciousness as a fly in amber.
America after World War II is often described as the age of conformity, of Eisenhower and Ozzie and Harriet, suburban prosperity, and Father Knows Best. Yep, America seemed a good place to be if you were white. Segregation and Jim Crow laws seemed a million miles away.
Everything in Memphis was segregated. There was not one thing integrated. From the cradle to the grave was segregated. No church, no school, no organization, not any, were integrated. The law said because of the color of my skin, I could not sit on the front of the bus. And so I had to go to the back. Well, I want Jesus just to walk with me.
Well, Jim Crow laws are a set of laws designed only for people of color, black people. Separate but equal. You can drink water, but it has to be from this water fountain only, and we have it marked so you won't get confused. It will say colored only.
Not everyone in the 50s was blind to the injustice and the contradictions of the South. In fact, you have to ask yourself, for such a historically unsophisticated place, why has the South produced an inordinate number of writers?
It's a complex and contradictory region. It's a beautiful place, but it is a place of great violence, a history that is troubled, but a place that celebrates gentility, politeness, manners, and family. So if you've got a writer who's willing to think through it and try to tell stories that will communicate that complexity, you've got something special, I'd say. And that's what the great Southern writers have done.
Intruder in the Dust is the first film to actually treat the South realistically and to show a true conscience about racism. A black farmer named Lucas Beecham is accused of murder in a small Mississippi town, and having befriended a young boy whose uncle is an attorney, he asks for his help.
You, young man, tell your uncle I wants to see him.
Want to see who?
Wants to see a lawyer. Lawyer? He ain't even going to need an undertaker.
Lucas is obstinate and proud, and he refuses to behave the way white people expect him to.
Lucas, has it ever occurred to you that if you just said Mr. to white people and said it like you meant it, you might not be sitting here now?
So I'm to commence now. I can start off by saying Mr. to folks that drags me out of here and builds a fire under me.
The film is remarkable for its even-handedness of the racial aspects of the story. It doesn't try to paint its character as victimized or helpless. It has a kind of a naturalism to it that's pretty amazing considering it was released in 1949.
You crummy, bigoted, burr-headed nigger.
Intruder in the Dust was directed by a man named Clarence Brown, relative unknown. Now, since then, a lot of bigger-name directors have tried to capture the nature of the South and failed miserably. What the South doesn't have is its defining auteur, a director like John Ford or Sam Peckinpah, a director whose interpretation of the South grew with each successive film. Doesn't have that. But what it does have is Tennessee Williams.
Lies! Lies inside and out! All lies!
Never inside! I never lied in my heart!
Williams didn't just lay the old caricature of the South to rest, he completely reinvented it. In a sense, he tried to make sense of it, and the best way to make sense of it was by making it sensory. Does that make any sense? Williams created a South putrid with physical and social displacement, loneliness, self-deception, and sexual hedonism.
This is the 19-year-old baby doll. She wouldn't let her husband come near her. She wouldn't let the stranger go away.
It was as far from the true South as Little Abner, but entirely on the other side of the compass. It was the kind of stuff actors could sink their teeth into, and boy did they ever.
You got plenty of room to get by me now. You think I'm going to interfere with you?
Tennessee Williams changed people's perceptions of the South by writing about a love of the South, but not glorifying it, a South that was lost, that no longer existed, like an Eden which had just suddenly gone bad.
You just fixed your wagon. With a smart talk, you just fixed your wagon. I'm gonna wipe that grin off your greasy wop face for good.
Well, a good portion of America was spent in the 50s watching Westerns. 10 different Tennessee Williams plays were turned into movies, and in the course of that decade, the man systematically dismantled every preconception of the South, of its dumbass caricatures and its bullshit flowering magnolia pretense of chivalry and gentility and family unity. Gone.
A Streetcar Named Desire is set in a 2-room apartment in New Orleans, but it could be any trailer park in the South. It's loud, it's unsettling, raw, and exposed. You feel like you're staring into the open windows of a sweaty, feral prison.
Marry me, Mitch.
I don't think I want to marry anymore. No, you're not clean enough to bring in a house with mud.
On A Streetcar Named Desire, you have the Old South, Blanche Dubois, coming from Laurel, a plantation home. And we have her sister Stella moving to New Orleans and marrying a Pollock, Stanley Kowalski. And that's the New South. And her sister has adjusted to this new world, adapted, but Blanche Dubois has not. Tennessee sees all kinds of insights into human beings through this conflict between these two worlds.
Blanche Dubois, who wanted so much to stay a lady.
What does it cost for seeing plays like that?
But these are tribute from an admirer of mine.
Well, he must have a lot of admiration.
Let me see if I can explain this properly. Vivian Lee is not only a relic of the Old South, she is a relic of the old-style school of acting, because director Elia Kazan has letting these method actors like Marlon Brando and Carl Malden go positively Stanislavski on her poor ass. That is what makes the film so compelling. Her acting is a counterpoint to the modern style of acting, the same way the Old South has given way to the New South. That's what Streetcar Named Desire is. It's the modern, screwed-up South dancing on Scarlett O'Hara's grave.
The youth who brought remembrance of yesterday. The man who was willing to take her out of the dark alleys of New Orleans. The brute who lied and cheated, who promised everything, gave nothing.
Don't you ever talk that way to me. Disgusting, vulgar, greasy. And who do you think you are, a couple of queens or something?
Streetcar Named Desire actually changed the way that people watch films. It proved that amorphous things like desire and psychosis could be captured on screen. You know, it made people feel unnerved and sophisticated at the same time. And, of course, it had the unmistakable viscera of a Tennessee Williams play.
Born in Mississippi in 1911, Thomas Lanier Williams would eventually change his name to Tennessee, the birth state of his father. A prolific writer, he has over 100 plays and novels to his name. He's a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner. Tennessee Williams was the son of a hard-drinking, traveling salesman. His mother, Edwina, was a Southern belle, a faded Southern belle who had tendencies toward borderline hysteria.
Tennessee Williams' childhood is very much a part of the world of his drama. His father was very abusive, C.C. He was nasty. His sister Rose, she seemed to have some kind of a mental disorder where she was saying things that you didn't say. Later in life, she came out with these awful things about nuns masturbating with candles, things like that. He is an outsider himself. Growing up in the world as a gay man, he didn't belong, he didn't fit. And consequently, he's very aware of outsiders and the plight of outsiders. He's very sympathetic to understanding them.
Certain elements are guaranteed in a Tennessee Williams play. There'll be a self-deluded matriarch trying to recapture the pretend gentility of her past. You know, a woman in descent, both figuratively and literally. That character will be based on Tennessee Williams' mom. She will be having some sort of incestuous relationship with her son, at least psychologically, because she sees in her son her own faded past unrecapturable. There will be an attractive younger woman, but she will be mentally unstable, some kind of candidate for lobotomy, which is what happened to Tennessee Williams' real-life sister, Rose. There'll be an attractive man. He'll be taking his shirt off a lot. His name will be Marlon Brando or Paul Newman, possibly Warren Beatty. There'll be another attractive man, but he will be a corpse, dictating all the action from beyond the grave, like Skipper in Cat on the Hot Tin Roof or Sebastian in Sunday Last Summer. Sometimes all of this will be going on in one scene.
I don't give a damn whether Big Daddy likes me or don't like me.
Boys, I'd like to see this place run into the ground by a drunken ex-football hero.
The Tennessee Williams Pulitzer Prize-winning play unfolds with a shocking impact and uncompromising realism that makes its author the most talked-about dramatist of our day.
Did you know that during the Cold War, the BBC policy in the event of a nuclear strike was to air The Sound of Music? The idea was that the family values of that film would reassure viewers, calm them with the story of a bunch of adorably drilled Nazi youth moppets teaching some schmaltzy lesson about individuality. The policy should have been to show Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, because people would have watched that and thought, compared to this family, nuclear incineration isn't a bad option. Imagine all the tensions that you go through in a lifetime with your family, all the build-ups, the confrontations, that eternally percolating lava of bile that you keep suppressed because, for God's sake, they're your family. Now, condense that into the critical mass of one single afternoon, and that is Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Burl Ives plays Big Daddy. He's a plantation owner. He's also got terminal cancer. And he's got no one to pass the family fortune on to, no one capable anyway. One son is a dullard, and the other son, whose name is Brick and is played by Paul Newman, is an ex-football hero and present-day drunk. Brick refuses to make love to his wife because he claims he's grieving over the sudden death of his best friend, Skipper. So there's the corpse running the show.
I don't mind making a fool of myself over you.
Well, I mind. I feel embarrassed for you.
Feel embarrassed? But I can't live on this way.
Now, you agreed to accept that condition.
I know I did, but I can't.
Maggie, Brick's wife, is played by Elizabeth Taylor, and she is a cat on a hot tin roof, desperate to get laid. So pretty much every man watching the film in the cinema in 1958 is wondering just what the hell is wrong with Paul Newman.
Paul Newman vividly plays the emotionally tormented football hero.
But how in hell on earth do you imagine you're going to have a child by a man who cannot stand you?
Meanwhile, Brick's brother, Gooper, and his sister-in-law, May, are anything but impotent. She seems to be popping kids out of her womb like self-rising biscuits. Every one of them a shrieking, necklace stump.
Jesus wants me for a sunbeam, a sunbeam, a sunbeam. I'll be a sunbeam for him.
Amen.
Do you like to sing in Big Daddy?
Pass the black-eyed peas.
Just look at Big Daddy. They did some of the thank you stars for.
The entire family is gathered around Big Daddy's Mississippi plantation to play a little game called Daddy's Dying, Who's Got the Will? Except that Big Daddy doesn't even know he's dying because nobody's bothered to tell him. And in the course of a single evening, he will find out the truth. He will also announce how much he despises every one of his grandchildren. May will turn into a big babbling ball of incoherent gibberish. Maggie will become immaculately knocked up. And the audience will begin to discover that maybe Brick is, southern phrase is, he's got a little sugar in his socks. You understand what I'm saying? He's been to Arkansas. He's got marshmallow toes. He's a friend of Wayne Sleep. You understand what I'm saying? Bit of a velvet turtle. Tennessee Williams always claimed that his stories were Southern comedies. Obviously, this was some sort of self-effacement, but Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is kind of a metaphor for the decline of the Old South because much like Big Daddy's Family, it's built on artificial values. Millions of people flocked to see Cat on a Hot Tin Roof in 1958. Despite strict censorship laws, Americans were, for the first time, being shown themes they knew existed, but had never faced before.
Dysfunctional families were everywhere. Alcoholism was rampant in the home. It was hidden. Homosexuality was hidden. And suddenly, with Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, you have this incredibly dysfunctional family. And all the mendacity, the lying that's going on, the covering up. So much a part of the family of the 50s. So this play was a big contrast to what people were seeing on television. And perhaps that was why it was so successful. People realized it was closer to the truth than Father Knows Best.
See, before Williams, the South was just this place that Hollywood and Northerners trotted out for minstrel-style entertainment. What Williams did was to give the South a dimension, a feeling. He made it nasty and sexy and dirty and psychotic and illicit. And that feeling of the South was going to change forever what Americans considered to be culture.
I said me my good girl talk last night. Now we talk for an hour. She wanna go down the Red Cross, no little sack that old Red Cross.
Trying to determine when rock and roll was born is like trying to figure out where blue turns to purple. But one thing's for certain, the rock and roll lifestyle was invented in 1953 by that other Williams boy, Hank, who after only 4 years of being the biggest selling country singer in America decided to take a lot of pills and die in the back of a chauffeured Cadillac. So now all rock and roll needed was a living white man to front it. December 4th, 1956. The biggest selling film in America is The Ten Commandments, and the biggest selling song is Que Sera Sera by Doris Day. And a film called The Blackboard Jungle about teenage music has been banned right here in Memphis for being too incendiary. Should have been banned for being too goddamn anemic. It features a pandering, pasty-faced pudge bucket of a man named Bill Haley with a meticulously prescribed spit curl right in the middle of his forehead, effectively killing rock and roll before it can even get started. Fortunately, here at 706 Union Avenue, something indescribably momentous is about to occur.
Well, that's all right, Mama. That's all right for you. That's all right, Mama. Just any way you do it, that's all right. That's all right.
Sun Studios was set up by Sam Phillips in January of 1950. The studio claims to be the birthplace of rock and roll, and that's debatable. But this isn't. Some of the greatest artists in the history of music have recorded in this 540-square-foot room. You might have seen this picture before. If you haven't, I will explain it to you. That is Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins in the same room. Let me repeat that. Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins in the same room. If you were a religious scholar, that would be the equivalent of Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and Carl Perkins in the same room. Now, you can witter on and on about rock and roll and its twisted, incestuous roots that come out of gospel and blues and jump and country and cowboy, but this is a fact. Any music that has ever made you tap your feet or bang your hands on the steering wheel or want to set a barn on fire or rip your clothes off or rip somebody else's clothes off and run around in the mud like wild pigs or embark on some ritual killing spree came out of the Delta. out of the cotton fields, out of the South.
Now the sun gon' shine my back door someday. Wind gon' rise and blow my blues away, but you don't love me that way.
Of all the images the Mississippi Delta evokes, none is more enduring than the blues. The 12-bar shapes of artists like Howlin' Wolf, John Lee Hooker, and Muddy Waters also gave shape to an entire region. Sam Phillips realized there was a musical explosion about to happen, and he needed to open it up to a broader audience.
Sam Phillips said, "If I can find a white guy who has the feeling, not who sings like a black guy, but has the feeling, I think we can make $1 million. And all of a sudden, here comes Elvis, here comes Jerry Lee, here comes Charlie Rich, here comes Roy Orbison, and the white cats are starting to make their niche in there. And when they did, it took off like a jet.
Well, I quit my job down at the car wash. I left my mama a goodbye.
What did those first heady couple of years of rockabilly and Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and that whole, this rock and roll that came out of Memphis, what did it feel like?
Every day it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It was like a forest fire that was out of control, and they couldn't stop it. You can't stop. If something's good musically, it'll go through a wall. You can't stop it.
Well, it's been so long, this street.
Elvis would go through many, many incarnations before he took a lot of pills and died. He remains the greatest musical mystery of all time. During a period which lasted roughly from 1954 to his induction into the Army in '58, Elvis played rockabilly. And rockabilly caused its listeners to go manic. It sent girls into paroxysms. It made young men want to go into their bedroom and pick up an imaginary guitar and reinvent themselves. It made housewives damp. It was sexual and febrile, and it made no intellectual sense whatsoever. It made square people nervous. It invoked Satan. It was the South getting revenge for everything the world had ever done to it. And in the end, it turns out that Elvis was just a nice Southern boy, the kind who said yes sir and no sir to older people.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was my latest RCA escape, a release. We have another one here. We have another song here, friends, that we hope you like. It's called Heartbreak Hotel.
In early 1956, Sam Phillips sold Elvis Presley's contract to RCA Victor for $35,000, coming up slightly short of his $1 million profit projection. Now he needed a new, greasy, chicken-fried redneck hick to take Elvis's place. And this time, it wouldn't be so pretty.
You're fine.
Jerry Lee Lewis was a redneck in every sense of the word. He took hell-raising to a new level. If people thought Elvis was a bad influence on America's youth, they had no idea what Jerry Lee was about to stir up.
Somebody said to Elvis, they said, rock and roll is corrupting America's youth. Elvis, you're bad. You're wearing black leather jackets and greaseback hair. Elvis said, I may be corrupting America's youth, but Jerry Lee the Killer is marrying them.
Mr. Righteous Straight Ball of the Fire.
See, Jerry Lee Lewis was the music what William Faulkner was the literature and what Tennessee Williams was the playwriting. That is to say, indomitable. Elvis Presley was a nice boy, but Jerry Lee Lewis was a shit kicker. He owns the 2 biggest selling rock and roll records of all times, and he always claimed that he could outdrink, outfuck, outplay, and out-ingest more drugs than any other human being on the face of the planet. He shot his bass player with a .357 Magnum. One of his wives ended up floating face down in the swimming pool in the backyard, and he was thrown out of England for marrying his 13-year-old cousin. And on top of all this, Jerry Lee Lewis claims to be a deeply religious man. He's always said that when he dies, he's going straight to hell, and that is probably why Jerry Lee Lewis is not yet dead.
Neither Elvis nor Jerry Lee knew exactly how they were changing the way we dress, how we changed our taste in music. They were affecting not only America, but they were affecting the world. John Lennon said a whole lot of shaking. He thought it was a perfect rock and roll record.
The body of music that came from Southern artists defined the second half of the 20th century. Johnny Cash, Ray Charles, Dolly Parton, Leadbelly, Robert Johnson, Tina Turner, Patsy Cline, B.B. King, all of them Southern. And the segregation of the South did not apply to music. White musicians recorded black songwriters and vice versa. And everyone was equally fleeced by the record companies.
Country boy, I wish I was you and you was me.
Southern music was a shadowland of honky-tonk hell and rockabilly heaven, of drugs, murder, alcohol, miscegenation, and illumination. And Hollywood would repeatedly and always belatedly try to capture this demonology.
Hank Williams, you're cheating hard.
Hank Williams lives again, sings again, as George Hamilton brings to life on the screen a man known and loved in 1,000 American cities and towns. The one, the only, Hank Williams.
The one and only Hank Williams. If Hank Williams is the one and only kind of guy, then why is someone else pretending to be him? Of all the shitty things that Hollywood does to sell films, the absolute shittiest is when they try to crank out some musical biopic. A musical biopic exploits the details of an artist's life and pigeonholes them, homogenizes them, and in the end just lies about it. Patsy Cline died in a plane crash near Camden, Tennessee, 80 miles west of Nashville. And yet, in the biopic of her life, Sweet Dreams, the producers decide to have her plane crash out in the American desert in the Southwest. The screenwriters of a biopic are forced to attribute character changes to specific events in that artist's life. But that's not how life happens. Ray Charles becomes a heroin addict in the film Ray because his brother died, when in fact Ray Charles became a heroin addict because he kept shooting fucking heroin into his arm. It's reductive lies, it's reductive emotions, it's reductive talent. People do not listen to the music of Johnny Cash for any other reason than it allows them to tap into a greater depth of emotion. Watching Joaquin Phoenix pretend to be Johnny Cash is about as goddamn illuminating as if Johnny Cash had stopped the concert mid-song and started doing scenes from Gladiator. But wait a minute, Rich. Wait just a cotton-picking minute. That's what you're saying. Didn't Joaquin Phoenix get an Academy Award nomination for playing Johnny Cash? And didn't Jamie Foxx win an Academy Award for being Ray Charles? Well, yes, they did. What that means is that Jamie Foxx did a slightly better job of raping Ray Charles' corpse than Joaquin Phoenix did of raping Johnny Cash's corpse. Actors don't portray musicians out of some sense of honor or admiration. They do it because it's Oscar bait. But Rich, you're saying, what if it turns that person on to their music? If you do not have the innate ability to seek out someone's music on your own and you have to wait for Hollywood to do it for you, then you are some sort of hillside grazer of culture. You are a sheep, a cow, what is biologically classified as a ruminant. Fuck you.
There's a place near to me where I'm longing to be, with my friend at the old country church. There with my
Rednecks, racism, and religion. Those are the three R's that we ascribe to the South. And pundits and journalists are quite fond of using the term Bible Belt. So maybe it's time we assert exactly what part of the South we're talking about when we say the Bible Belt.
This is the area geographers generally regard as the South. And this is the Bible Belt. It's not a caricature to say that Southerners are pious. In fact, there are more churches per square mile in the South than any other part of the United States. Why?
The industrial strength religion of the South stems from its sense of persecution. Southerners have always believed that they are part of God's special preserve and that they've suffered unjustly, and they believe wholeheartedly in a triumphal Armageddon. They just can't quite put an exact date on it. The number of demagogues who flooded the South after the Civil War is matched only by the amount of evangelists. Think about it like this. Abe Lincoln was assassinated on Good Friday, 1865. So you have to picture 50, 100, 200,000 northern ministers ascending the pulpit on Easter Sunday, crazed, stunned, and impassioned. Who is going to be the recipient of that Old Testament vengeance? The South. That's who. There were 4 million freed slaves after the war, and there were millions more people homeless and destitute. The religious volunteers of the North who fed and clothed and educated these people also threw in a very, very healthy dose of old-time religion. In the year 1960, it was estimated that 65 million people went to movies on Saturday night, the largest mass convocation of the week, until 12 hours later, when 90 million people went to church. This is why Hollywood has always been deathly afraid of the church. In fact, only 4 films about Southern religion have ever been made, and they're all called Inherit the Wind.
Inherit the Wind makes news everywhere. In London, a glittering world premiere.
Inherit the Wind was always going to be a controversial film. That's because its essential argument, evolution versus creationism, is an indictment of small-town religion. But it's also a parable about McCarthyism and censorship and the danger of a society not allowed to think.
God speaks to Brady, and Brady tells the world. Brady, Brady, Brady Almighty! The Lord is watching.
In Inherit the Wind, a teacher in a small town in Tennessee is arrested for teaching evolution. Silver-tongued orator comes to town to prosecute him and to stand up for the God-fearing local townspeople. The defense for the teacher is an avowed agnostic from Chicago named Henry Drummond. Drummond tries to introduce scientific evidence into the trial, but the judge refuses it. And so, Drummond convinces the prosecutor, Brady, to take the witness stand as an expert on Genesis. The scenes between Frederick March and Spencer Tracy are considered some of the finest acting in American film.
We must not abandon faith. Faith is the most important thing. Then why did God plague us with the power to think? Mr. Brady, why do you deny the one faculty of man that raises him above the other creatures of the earth? The power of his brain to reason. What other merit have we? The elephant is larger, the horse is swifter and stronger, the butterfly is far more beautiful, the mosquito is more prolific, even the simple sponge is more durable. What does a sponge think? I don't know. I am a man, not a sponge. What do you think a sponge thinks? If the Lord wishes a sponge to think, it thinks. Do you think a man should have the same privilege as a sponge? Of course. This man wishes to be accorded the same privilege as a sponge. He wishes to think.
It was a film that rewarded so-called free thinkers at the comical expense of, you guessed it, the South. The film's satirical bite is provided by Gene Kelly, playing the cynical Baltimore newspaperman sent to Tennessee to cover the circus.
You know the stranger, ain't you? Are you looking for a nice, clean place to stay?
I had a nice, clean place to stay, madam, and I left it to come here.
Now, Inherit the Wind is an indictment of intolerance and small-town fanaticism. But why does a film released in 1960 have to travel back to 1925 to ridicule Southern fundamentalism? The film is based on a real trial, the Scopes monkey trial of 1925 that took place in a town called Dayton, Tennessee. There really was a John Scopes who really taught evolution and who really was arrested. But he agreed to be arrested. See, the businessmen of the town of Dayton, Tennessee cooked up the whole trial as a publicity stunt, just to get the town's name on the map.
My friends, man did not evolve from the ape, but the ape evolved from man. Now you take a look at this creature sitting here.
Grandpa, welcome to Hillsborough, sir. Have you come to testify for the prosecution or the defense?
The film requires you to accept that in Tennessee in 1925 it was illegal and blasphemous to teach evolution. But in fact, evolution was a standardized course in every high school in 1925 in Tennessee. It wasn't called evolution, it was called civic biology. And among the things civic biology advocated was how to deal with feeble-mindedness.
The remedy. If such people were lower animals, we would probably kill them off to prevent them from spreading. Humanity will not allow this, but we do have the remedy of separating the sexes into asylums and other places, and in various ways preventing intermarriage and the possibilities of perpetuating such a low and degenerate race. Remedies of this sort have been tried successfully in Europe and are now meeting with some success in this country. So Bryan's defense in the real trial wasn't so much for creationism as against the totalitarian eugenics that Tennessee was advocating in 1925. By the time the film was released in 1960, the question of how we got here had already been settled ecumenically. Evolution was taught in the schools, and foot-wash and fundamentalism was taught in the churches.
Well, I want Jesus.
It was in the black churches of the South that true evolution was occurring. The African American may have been divested of political power or the right to vote, but the black church had a mind of its own.
Lord, we come this morning in the name of Jesus the Christ. Lord, we come, Lord, because there's no other place that we can go.
Do you see a kind of segregation in religion in America?
Yeah, but it's not racial.
Yeah. Why though? Why?
It's culture.
Why are the black churches more exciting?
Man, if the Lord pulled you through what they pulled us through, you would be excited. Can you imagine what we've gone through? People need belief, they need faith, they need hope. And part of what we were able to do is to reach way down in our being and feel good about it. You gotta have something to feel good about.
The church is the genesis, the womb, the sustainer, and the challenging force behind the struggle of African Americans for any semblance of equality. From Dr. Martin Luther King to Marcus Garvey to Jesse Jackson, every civil rights decision in America that has become a legal ruling through a courtroom began in the church.
We often view the civil rights movement as a political movement, but really it was a religious movement. The church has been, the solid rock that we've had. Our meetings were in churches, and that's why they burned them. That's why they bombed them, because they were so effective.
There was a real feeling that a change was taking place. The struggle was about far more than just civil rights under law. It was also about fundamental issues of freedom, respect, dignity, and economic and social equality. People were getting organized, and although violence would be a major part of the struggle, the people gained strength from their leaders and the church.
We went to church to organize. We knew that because we were so strong religiously and spiritually, we could effect change politically. We had to have that spiritual belief to gain that kind of strength and that kind of courage to face segregation, to face racism, to say we're going to vote and our vote must count.
This is all we need.
Hollywood has never been accused of being timely. By the mid-50s in America, the civil rights movement was in full swing. In Montgomery, Alabama, in 1955, a woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat in the all-white section of a city bus. In 1956, the University of Alabama was forcibly integrated, and Martin Luther King's message of nonviolent change was in its ascendancy. Hollywood was making films starring Rock Hudson and Doris Day. It wasn't until 7 years later, in 1962, that Hollywood decided to readdress the problem of racism by adapting the work of the Southern writer Harper Lee. The genius of To Kill a Mockingbird is to tell the story through the eyes of a 6-year-old girl, Scout Finch. The film is actually a cross between a Scooby-Doo haunted house story and a small-town rape trial, but somehow it works.
You want to tell us what really happened?
I got something to say. And if you ain't gonna do nothing about it, then you're just a bunch of lousy, yellow, stinking cowards.
Scout and her younger brother Jim are growing up in a small town in Alabama. They're obsessed with their neighbor who's kind of a recluse. His name is Boo Radley. Meanwhile, Scout's dad, Atticus Finch, a lawyer, is hired by the mayor to defend a black man who's been accused of beating and raping a white woman. The courtroom scene in To Kill a Mockingbird is sometimes cited as the greatest cinematic trial in movie history. It's absolutely devoid of any breastfeeding or histrionics. Gregory Peck states his case calmly, simply, effectively, and his assessment of racism is stunningly simple.
The witnesses for the state, with the exception of the sheriff of Needham County, have presented themselves to you gentlemen, to this court, in the cynical confidence that their testimony would not be doubted. Confident that you gentlemen would go along with them on the assumption, the evil assumption, that all Negroes lie, that all Negroes are basically immoral beings, all Negro men are not to be trusted around our women.
Of course, that was 1962. Thank God things have changed nowadays, huh? No modern-day civil servant would stoop to that kind of stereotypical condemnation of a black man, calling him a liar. Ha!
The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegal. It's not true.
I've been appointed to defend Tom Robinson. Now that he's been charged, that's what I intend to do.
You taking his
You'll excuse me, Mr.
Come man are you?
Luckily for us, Gregory Peck's character survived. But the reality of it is, if a white man had stood up for a black man accused of raping a white woman in that era, he too would have been lynched, because that was just unheard of. And for those white people who did do that, they suffered. You can look at the museum exhibits and you can see them being bloodied and beaten. The reality of it is a lot scarier than anything Hollywood could ever portray.
By the end of To Kill a Mockingbird, 6-year-old Scout Finch has learned a valuable lesson about tolerance, and that works out perfectly because 6 years old is about the average age any moral message from Hollywood should aim for. By 1967, Hollywood, in full throttle liberal overdrive, decided to flex its moral superiority over the moviegoer. The South was going to be punished again, this time by depicting its people as universally racist.
Skulls caved in, man. Could have been a hitchhiker. Looking at us. She's got $100 to pay for an abortion.
Thank you. Sidney Poitier plays a Philadelphia homicide detective named Virgil Tibbs. Just happens to be passing through Sparta, Mississippi on his way from visiting his mom. First time we see him, he's stepping off the train in an expensive suit. First time we see the townspeople, they're sitting around a greasy diner arguing over a piece of fly-encrusted cake. And then when a body is found, the sheriff, played by Rod Steiger, tells his deputies to run out and find anybody who's been passing through. Virgil Tibbs fits the bill.
On your feet, boy. I mean now. Got a name, boy? Virgil Tibbs. Virgil. I'm a police officer. Don't you push me, boy! They call me Mr. Tibbs. They've got a murder on their hands. They don't know what to do with it.
This is the beginning of a series of vicious interactions that continue throughout the film. And what makes it so watchable. It's not really about solving a murder. It is about the tension between the people of a small southern town and the intruder in their midst. Now, it's impossible to underestimate the screen value of Sidney Poitier in the 60s. He wasn't just an iconic black leading man. He was the only black leading man. He was mannered, articulate, educated, a safe black actor for white moviegoers to watch.
Was Mr. Colbert ever in this greenhouse, say last night, about midnight?
Gillespie?
Yeah.
You saw it.
Well, I saw it.
Well, what are you going to do about it?
I don't know.
I'll remember that. There was a time when I could have had you shot.
Well, it's probably safe to say that was a watershed moment in American race relations, at least the way moviegoers saw it.
In the heat of the night. In the real world, black and white men were fighting side by side in Vietnam. National Guardsmen were battling rioters in Newark and Detroit, and Martin Luther King was advocating nonviolent change. But in Hollywood, method actors were slapping each other. People in the cinema, black and white, cheered. It's a moment that many thought would win Poitier the Academy Award, but it didn't, because Rod Steiger pulled out every actor's studio trick in the book as the eyeball-rolling sheriff, slowly awakening to the realization that he and Tibbs might be kindred spirits. During the filming, Steiger went through 238 packs of chewing gum and then started in on the scenery.
I got the motor, which is money, and the body, which is dead.
You're holding the wrong man.
In the heat of the night, won Rod Steiger the 1967 Academy Award for Best Actor. By the end of the film, he's learned a valuable life lesson that all Americans like to learn in the last 5 minutes of a film. Poitier, on the other hand, has merely done his job, which is to solve a homicide. At the end of the film, the two men meet at a train station. They shake hands. Poitier boards the train and heads off. And when that train returns, my friend, it's going to be carrying Will Smith and Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington and every other black actor who has risen to the forefront of American cinema. Well, Sidney Poitier was there first.
By now, films set in the South seemed to almost have their own cinematic language. In fact, they began to feel like they were sometimes cannibalizing each other.
In To Kill a Mockingbird, little Scout Finch asks her dad a very interesting question. She says, "Daddy, who would kill a mockingbird? It's just a bird." Well, you would kill a mockingbird for one reason, because it's mocking you, that's why. In the Heat of the Night mocks To Kill a Mockingbird mercilessly. Both films feature the same typical small-town traits. Sneering, bigoted townsfolk, intractable in their ways and suspicious of outsiders. In both films, it turns out that the crime was instigated by a compulsively promiscuous teenager. And, interestingly enough, both films use a very tried-and-true Southern technique of determining guilt or innocence by looking at someone's hands.
He's left-handed, isn't he?
How do I know?
Well, he seemed left-handed to me.
I believe Harvey is a southpaw. Now ain't he, Shackback?
What if he is? What's that make him?
Innocent.
Will you catch this, please? Thank you. Now then, this time, will you please catch it with your left hand?
I can't, sir.
Why can't you?
I can't use my left hand at all. I got it caught in a cotton gin when I was 12 years old. All my muscles were tore loose.
See, in a Southern courtroom, forensic evidence, acute testimony, detailed trial preparation, who needs it? All you have to do is observe whether the accused is right-handed or left-handed. Case closed. Which hand did I use?
In the Heat of the Night was a big pill for a lot of Americans to swallow in 1967. It probably succeeded in making a lot of liberal-minded folks feel good about themselves, but the film that made viewers feel complicit with screen characters in 1967 was Bonnie and Clyde. While Sidney Poitier and company were slapping each other around the greenhouse, Arthur Penn was taking violence to choreographic levels. It opened up a floodgate of blood, paving the way for the Peckinpahs and the Tarantinos of the world. Within a year, the escapism of film blood would give way to reality, namely the assassinations of Robert F. Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King.
Of the three of us that spent the last hour of Martin Luther King's life in that room, it was three of us. And of the three, I'm the only one left. Martin was leaning over the railing talking to Jesse Jackson. I turned to go down the stairs. I got 5 or 6 steps away from Martin Luther King, and the shot rang out. Kapaya! I looked back. He had been knocked from the railing back onto the floor. There was a tremendous hole in the right side of his face. There was blood everywhere. I thought I was having a nightmare, but the nightmare was that I was awake.
Don't you feel like crying sometimes?
Sadly, I tell you, you can kill the dreamer. But I hurriedly tell you, you absolutely cannot kill the dream. And the dream is still living. It's still alive.
American cinema generally reacts to real tragedy and violence by expanding it to cartoonish levels on the screen. So from here on in, Americans were willing to watch films about racial conciliation as long as they came with a big heaping helping of whoop-ass.
The hate, the fear, the lynching mob, the Klansman. Esteemed thespianator Richard Burton plays a Southern man who more or less takes on the boys in the hood single-handedly.
We live in a clan-ridden society. About 40 guerrillas dominating the lines with 16,000 so-called free people.
Burton was pretty well liquored up throughout the entire filming, and his attempt at a Southern accent is accurate if the accent you're talking about happens to be Southern Wales. Lee Marvin plays the sheriff of a small town who may or may not be a you-know-what.
I'm just a backcountry sheriff. All 3 of us over here. There are 2 kinds of law open to a backcountry sheriff. You can book and punish, or you can cool things, smooth them out by bending the law a little to keep people from breaking them. Member of the Klan. What the hell kind of a question is that?
What the hell kind of an answer is that? What the hell kind of film is this? Once again, the townspeople are simple-minded jacklegs, the politicians are corrupt and ineffectual, and half the population seems to be secret members of the KKK.
Boys at state headquarters don't mind if you go out and burn a few crosses every once in a while. Every once in a while, take an agitator out and touch him up a little bit. Leave him feeling chastised so he knows you're his good Christian neighbor just doing what you gotta do so everybody can get along.
And it's up to Richard Burton to slap some sense into him. And I do mean slap.
Richard Burton as Bright. One man against the Klan.
Burton obviously did not want to injure his drinking hand. After the death of Martin Luther King, Hollywood's attempts to deal with one of the most serious racial issues of the time had degenerated into one-dimensional chop socky. The Klansman, however, does have one amazingly visionary scene. O.J. Simpson, after being beaten up by a bunch of Southern rednecks, actually hijacks a white Ford Bronco and escapes from the police.
What group of people meet? For the bourgeois Negro.
By the early 70s, the fairly remonstrative intent of In the Heat of the Night had given way to a pandering assembly line of rednecksploitation. In the film Tick, 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 Former pro football star Jim Brown confronts small-town rednecks, gets beaten up, exacts revenge. In Bucktown, former pro football star Fred Williamson confronts small-town rednecks, gets beaten up, exacts revenge. Films like these were the kissing cousins of northern-based films like Shaft and Across 110th Street. And the abiding message seemed to be, A, the South is full of retards that can't seem to understand the Civil War's over and they lost, and B, former pro football players shouldn't be allowed to act.
Southern prejudice as a cinematic construct was a no-brainer for Hollywood and an easy leap for viewers to make. The whole idea of the South is this complex cauldron of seething passions and self-loathing and faded glory and grotesquerie. That was all done, okay? All of the William Faulkner books, all of the Tennessee Williams plays had been made into films. It was time to give a hillbilly a gun. And so in 1969, director Dennis Hopper, producer Peter Fonda purchased 2 handmade Harley Davidsons and set out to make a road movie. They improvised a lot of scenes. At one point, Hopper, who was a bit racked during the production, smashed a guitar over the photographer's head, and he was replaced with Laszlo Kovacs. The film is called Easy Rider.
This year, the judges of the Cannes Film Festival presented the award Best Film by a New Director to Easy Rider. It's the story of a man who went looking for America and couldn't find it anywhere.
It's often called the counterculture film that changed Hollywood. You probably watch it now and wonder what all the fuss was about. Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda smoke a lot of pot. Then they get on their bikes and ride. Then they smoke some more pot. Then they ride their bikes. Then they smoke some pot. Then they smoke some pot and ride their bikes at the same time. Then they smoke some more pot. Then they meet Jack Nicholson. Then Peter Fonda gets really high and looks around and realizes he's misplaced his entire career. Then they smoke some more pot. Then they ride. Then they smoke some more pot. Then it turns out Dennis Hopper's a bit of a nutcase. Then they smoke some more pot. Then they ride. Then they smoke some more pot. Then they ride their bike. Then they smoke some more pot.
They're not scared of you. They're scared of what you represent to them. What you represent to them is freedom.
What the hell's wrong with freedom, man? That's what it's all about.
Cheech and Chong would eventually make a fortune doing the same kind of stoner confessional, but at the time, these guys were, well, they were looking for adventure, whatever comes their way. The tagline for the film was, "One man went looking for America. He found it."
Easy Rider stars Peter Fonda.
You do your own thing in your own time. You should be proud.
Also starring Dennis Hopper, the award-winning director of Easy Rider. Co-starring Jack Nicholson.
It's never explained which of the men that actually was. For the first 70 minutes of the film, they do seem to find a new emergent America. Communes, nonconformity, drugs, a nation in flux. You begin to appreciate what the director Hopper is trying to do. But then, as soon as they cross the Mississippi River into the South, Redneck Riviera.
Look like a bunch of refugees from a guerrilla love-in.
Oh, I just can't believe what are they doing here.
I don't know, but I don't think they'll make the parish line.
This kind of confrontation could have happened anywhere in America in 1969, but no. Hopper puts it squarely in the South. And he paints the men in the diner as ignorant Neanderthals. He makes the young girls look like they've never ever seen a motorcycle before. It's lazy, it's self-aggrandizing, it's not remotely anti-Hollywood. Hopper wants you to believe that the South in 1969 is no different than the South in 1869. And then, in the final scene, when for no discernible reason whatsoever a redneck with a shotgun blows Hopper and Fonda away, we don't realize that the filmmakers have just very cannily martyred themselves. No, all we realize is that men in the South don't like long-haired hippies.
Hey, Lord, look at them things. All the time, we'll scare the hell out of them.
Nonconformity, of course, was the byword of the 60s. The anti-establishment part of America was given way to anti-heroes, both real and cinematic. And what better place to stage the struggles of the anti-hero than a good old-fashioned Southern prison?
The Chain Gang film is the perfect embodiment of individual versus institution. Cool Hand Luke, starring Paul Newman, takes place in North Florida. It's basically a Christ parable disguised as a prison film. See, the first time you see Cool Hand Luke, what's he doing? He's cutting the heads off of parking meters. That is a reinterpretation of throwing the moneylenders out of the temple.
What are you doing there, fella? I just cut some meat thing. You better come along with us.
He's thrown into chains and confronts Pontius Pilate.
You're gonna get used to wearing them chains after a while, Luke. But you never stop listening to them clinking. But they're gonna remind you of what I've been saying.
Wish you'd stop being so good to me, Captain.
Don't you ever talk that way to me. Never! Never!
He performs a miracle, namely eating 50 eggs. This establishes him as Cool Hand Luke, Messiah, and the other inmates act as his apostles, living vicariously through his bravery and telling the world of his exploits.
What we got here, failure to communicate.
He's a failure to communicate.
Each time he attempts to escape, he's punished even more. He's chained. He's thrown into boxes. He's beaten remorselessly. Why hast thou forsaken me, O Lord? How much more biblical do you want to get?
Yourself to sweeten the down, rusting rhinestones setting wrong. That is food for Babylon we shall. Going nighty-eyed, scary, 'cause I got the Virgin Mary assuring me that I won't go home.
Okay, maybe I'm overdoing it, because I also thought that Edward Scissorhands was a Jesus parable, and also the Terminator, and Weekend at Bernie's, because, you know, he dies and then comes back to life. Nonetheless, Cool Hand Luke stands as one of the greatest anti-institutional films of all time. It would be remade a few years later as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The director, Stuart Rosenberg, and Paul Newman reunited in 1970 to make a film called WUSA, set at a right-wing radio station in New Orleans. In 1975, they made a film called The Drowning Pool, also set in the Deep South. In fact, if you were to nominate the actor who has portrayed the most memorable Southern characters, you would probably say it was Paul Newman. But you would be wrong.
From Georgia to Texas and back in 28 hours flat with a truckload of bootleg beer. Now, who would do a thing like that?
Okay, there's never going to be a scholarly assessment of Burt Reynolds' contribution to American cinema. But the truth remains, he is the undisputed king of Southern film.
During the 70s, Reynolds was one of the biggest box office draws in America, and he insisted that Hollywood make his films in the southern states. In fact, Smokey and the Bandit single-handedly hijacks the American car culture from California and replants it in the Deep South.
Never mind that the plots to a lot of Burt Reynolds films can actually be converted to pinball machines. How you doing, officer? Never mind that he prefigured that whole NASCAR, Walmart, Hooters kind of New South mentality by at least 5 years. You right? Yeah. Never mind he had a forehead like a goddamn gorilla. Forehead like a gorilla. He did, didn't he? He's positively simian. Burt Reynolds was a southern-bred actor-director. His films were set in the South. They weren't tragic, they weren't melodramatic, they weren't gothic. They were good old boy films. Full fast cars, good-looking women, fist fights, corrupt sheriffs, and truckloads of beer. Reflecting as it did, I think, the South prescribed by President Jimmy Carter, or more specifically, his beer-guzzling clown prince brother, Billy.
What Reynolds managed to do was to reclaim the Southerner's sense of humor, this time from a superior point of view. A new South was emerging, one with air conditioning and electoral power, and Reynolds was its voice.
Sure, you could write Burt Reynolds off as the embodiment of a string of made-to-order good-time films, except for one thing. He's also the driving force behind the most memorable Southern film of all time.
Where are you going, city boy? You'll find it. It ain't nothing but the biggest river in the state.
These are the men. Nothing very unusual about them. Suburban guys like you or your neighbor. Nothing very unusual about them until they decided to spend one weekend canoeing down the Cotahuasi River.
If the measure of a film is its imprint on the viewer, no Southern film has made more of an impression than Deliverance. Made in 1972 by John Boorman, it follows Inherit the Wind's Darwinism to its nucleus, survival of the fittest. Four Atlanta businessmen spend the weekend canoeing a whitewater river that's about to be destroyed by a hydroelectric dam.
These four men are characters in a new motion picture that was filmed in the hill country and deep forests of North Georgia. The movie is adapted from James Dickey's powerful best-selling novel, Deliverance.
We're never going to be able to get out of the man world if we don't have any place to go to from the man world. And that's why we need these rivers and streams and creeks and woods and mountains. You need to be in contact with nature as it was made by something else than men.
This is the South being erased, not by General Sherman, but by its own people. The four men don't want to pit themselves against nature. They want to pit themselves against a semblance of nature. They intend to be home by Sunday afternoon, back in Atlanta, watching football on television. And only Reynolds' character has any inkling of what they're about to get themselves into. The movie is unsettling from the beginning. It avoids the picture postcard cinematography of most outdoor films and washes out the colors. There's practically no musical soundtrack, and the wide, extended shots of the men paddling downriver gives us a sense that even though they're exhilarated, they're not ever really in control. They're naive men who are about to learn that cultural decency can actually become a liability.
The story goes that James Dickey, the screenwriter and author of the novel Deliverance, was an avid canoeist who once turned his canoe over in the Chattooga River in North Georgia. Some locals fished him out, drove him to town, gave him dry clothes, fed him. Two men even drove him back to his own car. Couldn't have been nicer. But on the drive home, Dickey, as novelists like to do, started imagining the whole incident as a novel. The only difference would be that in the novel, instead of going out of the way to help, the men butt raped him. Crazy writers with their overactive imaginations.
There's nothing remotely sexual or homoerotic about the rape scene in Deliverance. I mean, come on. Why are these guys attracted to Ned Beatty when John Voight is standing right beside him? What the scene does is to take everything we've come to envision of the South. Gentility, history, tradition, hospitality, racism, sexism, the entire human condition, and reduce it to savagery. It shows us the progressive human, the urban man, as nothing more than a fleshy, feminized, helpless animal. Ned Beatty is the sacrificial lamb of progress. The mountain men, with their isolation, ignorance, superstition, bloodshed, murder, liquor, hookworms, ghosts, and early death, are retaliating for their impending annihilation. Such a brutal act makes murdering the hillbillies not only justifiable, but necessary.
You look around you, Lewis. He could be out there anywhere watching us right now. We ain't gonna be so nice and hard to follow dragging a corpse.
Drew, what's the matter? Lewis, I'm gonna go off to the side.
Deliverance would shape people's misconception of the South for decades to come, far more than any movie that preceded it. It spawned an entire slew of knockoff films. In fact, 3 years later it was remade by Steven Spielberg, except it was called Jaws. The shark had better teeth. Even today, this strain of music is shorthand for the pure, unadulterated retardation of 13 states, 90 million people, and 230 years of history. Deliverance, for all its intentions, backfired. Most people think it's a horror film. In the 38 years since Deliverance, no film has captured a more palpable image of the South, nor have they really tried. Significant films have been made, Color Purple, Driving Miss Daisy, Tender Mercies, character-driven stories that make no claim to representing a larger class of people facing social upheaval. Hollywood's attempts to embrace the historical issues of the South have been belated, awkward, and downright distorted. Too many of us, Hollywood controls our perception of the South. In a Southern movie, community, family, history have to be a negative force, and then some lone, enlightened individual steps in and changes everything for the better. Martin Luther King spent his entire life trying to do that. In movies, it transpires in less than 2 hours. What Hollywood has uniformly failed to do is to capture the cultural wealth of the South and its natural beauty and its hospitality.
I think we feel misunderstood. We have to constantly educate people about the whole picture of being a Southerner. Because what the media has shown for the last 50 years, is the racism, the blatant racism, the segregation of the races, the fear, the Klan. But when you meet us for the first time and you see that warm embrace, people automatically love the South and love being around Southerners.
The South has a calmness about it. It has a certainty about it. The South is a special place. It really is.
Today, the big cities of the South are more or less interchangeable. There's virtually no recognizable difference between Charlotte and Atlanta, Birmingham and Jacksonville. It's all strip malls and McMansions. And, of course, there's a Waffle House every 300 yards.
As a setting, to impact a story, the South generally has to go back in time. And even then, you gotta wade through a shitload of lies, misrepresentation, and ridicule to get a true feeling for what the South really is.
Now you're scared. That's okay. I want you to savor that fear. The South evolved in fear. Fear of the Indian, fear of the slave, fear of the damn Union. South has a fine tradition of savoring fear.
Well, I don't care if the sun don't shine. I get my loving in the evening time when I'm with my baby.
And we've got some cinema from the Dirty South headed your way in just a few moments here on BBC4. Stay with us for God's Little Acre next.
We're gonna kiss and kiss and kiss and kiss and we're gonna kiss some more. Who cares?